people don't lose wealth because they never had a chance. They lose it because they were playing a game they didn't even know existed. They do everything they were told would lead to security. And yet, something always slips. Money comes in and disappears. Opportunities appear and vanish. Years pass, and nothing truly changes. And deep down, there's a quiet question most people are afraid to ask. Why does it feel like I'm running but never arriving? In this audiobook, The Wealth Game, you're about to uncover something most people never see clearly. You will discover why effort alone does not create wealth, why intelligence alone does not protect it, and why discipline without direction can still lead you into cycles that quietly drain everything you build. Because wealth is not just about earning, it's about understanding the game behind the earning. And here's the truth most people miss. If you don't understand the rules of wealth, you will unknowingly follow the rules of loss. This audiobook is not financial advice. It is educational. It is awareness. It is a shift in perspective. What you do with it is your responsibility. But if you stay with this journey chapter by chapter, something inside you will begin to change. You will stop seeing money as something you chase and start seeing it as something you position. You will stop measuring your life by effort and start measuring it by direction. And most importantly, you will begin to see the invisible patterns that keep people stuck for decades without realizing it. Here's what lies ahead. We will break down the hidden traps that keep people earning but never building, the emotional habits that quietly destroy wealth over time, the difference between income and control, why most people upgrade their lifestyle faster than they upgrade their thinking, how distraction has become the modern form of financial leakage, and the one shift that separates those who stay in the cycle from those who step outside of it. This is not about becoming rich overnight. This is about becoming aware, permanently. Because once you see the game clearly, you can never go back to playing it blindly. And that is where real power begins. If at any point something you hear resonates with you, take a second, pause, let it sink in, and if you feel it deeply, hit like or write the one line that struck you the hardest. Not for the algorithm, but as a quiet contract with yourself that you're no longer just listening, you're changing. Now, before we begin chapter 1, understand this. Everything you've been taught about money may not be wrong, but it may be incomplete. And incomplete understanding is one of the fastest ways to lose something valuable, because you act with confidence, but without clarity. And that combination is dangerous. Let's begin. Chapter 1, The Illusion of Progress. There's a moment in life where everything looks right, but feels wrong. You have a job, you have income, you have responsibilities, you're moving forward, at least on paper. But inside, there's tension, a quiet, persistent awareness that something isn't adding up. You're working, but not advancing, earning, but not building, busy, but not free. And the more you try to fix it by doing more, the tighter the loop becomes. This is where most people get trapped, not because they're lazy, but because they mistake movement for progress. Think about it. If you run on a treadmill for hours, you are exhausted. You are sweating. You are pushing yourself, but you haven't moved forward an inch. Now ask yourself honestly, how many people are doing that financially, working harder every year, earning more every year, yet somehow feeling just as constrained or even more? This is the illusion, and it's powerful because it rewards you just enough to keep going, but not enough to break free. A raise comes in, and expenses rise with it. A new opportunity appears, and so do new obligations. A promotion happens, and suddenly your time belongs to even more demands. From the outside, it looks like success, but inside, it feels like pressure. Because here's the truth. Progress that depends entirely on your constant effort is fragile. The moment your energy drops, everything pauses. The moment life interrupts, everything shakes, and over time that creates something most people never admit. Fear, not loud fear, not obvious fear, but quiet fear. Fear of stopping, fear of losing momentum, fear of what happens if you step away. And when fear enters the system, freedom quietly leaves. This is how people lose wealth without realizing it, not through one big mistake, but through years of unconscious patterns. Patterns that look responsible, but slowly build dependency. And dependency is the opposite of control. Now pause for a second. Look at your own life, not what it looks like from the outside, but how it feels on the inside. If everything stopped tomorrow, would your system keep working? Or would everything depend on you showing up again? That question is where the game begins to reveal itself. Because wealth is not just about having money. It's about what continues, even when you don't. And most people never build that. Not because they can't, but because no one ever showed them the difference. You see, the world teaches you how to earn, but it rarely teaches you how to separate yourself from the earning. And that's where the shift happens. Not when you work harder, but when you start thinking differently. When you stop asking, how can I make more this month? And start asking, what am I building that doesn't depend on me every second? That question is uncomfortable at first because it forces you to see the truth. But it's also the doorway. The moment you step through it, you stop being just a participant in the system, and you start becoming someone who understands it. And once you understand it, you begin to see something else, something subtle but powerful, that most people are not losing wealth because they lack opportunity. They're losing it because they never learned how to recognize what actually builds it. And in the next chapter, we're going to uncover one of the biggest misconceptions of all, the belief that earning more automatically means becoming wealthier, because that belief has cost people decades. Dear friend, you are definitely on the right track if you are watching this video. Like, subscribe, and write in the comments which topic or problem concerns you the most. We promise to prepare a professional video explanation at your request. Chapter 2. Income is not wealth. There is a dangerous assumption that quietly shapes how most people live their entire lives. It sounds logical. It feels right. It's repeated everywhere. If I earn more, I will be better off. And at first, that's true. More income can solve immediate problems. It can reduce stress. It can create breathing room. But here's where the illusion deepens. Because earning more does not automatically mean building wealth. In fact, for many people, earning more becomes the very thing that traps them deeper. Let that sink in. The moment income increases, something subtle happens. Expectations rise, lifestyle expands, standards shift. What once felt like enough suddenly feels average. And without realizing it, you begin adjusting your life to match your income. A better apartment, a newer car, more subscriptions, more convenience, more comfort. None of these things are wrong, but they come with something invisible, commitment. And commitment ties your future to your current level of earning. So now, it's no longer about having more. It's about maintaining more. And maintenance requires consistency. Consistency requires effort, and effort, over time, becomes pressure. This is how the cycle tightens. You earn more, you spend more, you commit more, you depend more. And suddenly, the freedom you thought you were buying turns into a system you have to sustain. This is why so many high earners still feel stuck. From the outside, it looks like they've made it. But internally, they're carrying more weight than ever. Because here's the truth most people avoid. Wealth is not measured by how much you earn. It is measured by how much you control. Control over your time. Control over your decisions. Control over your direction. And if your entire lifestyle depends on continuous effort, your control is limited, no matter how high the number is. Now think about something deeper. If two people both earn the same amount, but one of them builds systems that continue producing without them, and the other depends entirely on their daily effort, are they in the same position? On paper, yes. In reality, completely different. One is building leverage, the other is building dependency. And dependency is fragile because life does not move in straight lines. There are interruptions. There are unexpected moments. There are shifts you cannot control. And when your entire structure depends on you always being on, those moments become threats. This is why understanding the difference between income and wealth is not optional. It's foundational. Income is what you earn. Wealth is what remains and continues without you. Income is active. Wealth is positioned. Income requires presence. Wealth creates presence. Most people spend years increasing their income, but never step back to ask, what happens if I stop? That question is uncomfortable because it forces you to confront reality. But it's also the question that separates awareness from illusion. And once you start seeing this clearly, your behavior begins to change. You become more intentional. You stop chasing every increase blindly. You start evaluating, asking, is this improving my control or increasing my dependency? That shift alone can save you years. Now here's something even more important. This is not about avoiding success. It's not about rejecting growth. It's about aligning growth with awareness. Because growth without awareness creates complexity, and complexity without control creates stress. Real wealth moves differently. It's quieter, slower at first, less visible, but stronger. Because it's built on structure, not just effort. And structure is what holds when effort fluctuates. Take a moment here. Reflect honestly. Are you building something that supports you or something that depends on you? Because that difference will define your future. And in the next chapter, we're going to uncover something even more subtle, the hidden force that quietly drains wealth over time. Even when everything looks stable on the surface, it's not obvious, it's not dramatic, but it's happening every single day. And once you see it, you'll never ignore it again. Chapter 3. The Silent Leak. There is something happening to your wealth right now, even if you don't realize it. It's not dramatic. It doesn't show up as a crisis. It doesn't trigger alarms. In fact, it feels normal. And that's exactly why it's dangerous. Because the greatest losses in life rarely come from one big mistake. They come from small, repeated patterns that go unnoticed. This is the silent leak, and almost everyone has it. It doesn't matter how much you earn. It doesn't matter how disciplined you think you are. If you don't see it, it will quietly drain your progress over time. Now here's the part most people misunderstand. The silent leak is not just about spending money. It's about spending attention, energy, focus, time. Because in the modern world, those are the real currencies. And every day, they are being pulled away from you in ways that feel harmless. A few minutes scrolling, a quick distraction, an impulsive decision, a moment of emotional spending, a habit you tell yourself doesn't matter. Individually, they seem insignificant, but stacked over days, weeks, years, they become patterns, and patterns shape outcomes. Think about this carefully. Most people don't lose wealth because they make terrible decisions. They lose it because they make comfortable ones, repeatedly. They choose ease over intention, reaction over reflection, impulse over awareness. And over time, those choices compound, not in a way that builds them, but in a way that slowly pulls them off track. This is why awareness is everything. Because once you become aware, you start seeing the leak. You start noticing where your time actually goes, where your money actually flows, where your attention actually lives. And sometimes that realization is uncomfortable because it forces you to confront something real, that the life you're building is a direct reflection of the patterns you repeat. Now, pause for a moment. Ask yourself honestly, where is your attention going every day? Not where you think it goes, not where you want it to go, but where it actually goes. Because attention is the starting point of everything. Where your attention goes, your decisions follow. Where your decisions go, your outcomes form. And if your attention is constantly fragmented, your progress will be too. This is one of the biggest reasons people struggle to build wealth today. Not because they lack opportunity, but because their focus is constantly divided, pulled in every direction. Notifications, news, social media, comparison, noise. It never stops. And in that environment, clarity becomes rare. And without clarity, you default to habits, automatic decisions, short-term thinking, immediate gratification, and that feeds the silent leak. Because wealth requires something most people don't protect anymore. Sustained attention. The ability to stay focused on something long enough for it to grow. The ability to delay reaction and choose direction. The ability to step back and think. Now here's where it gets deeper. The silent leak is not just external, it's internal. It's the way you respond to discomfort, the way you handle boredom, the way you deal with uncertainty. Most people escape it. They distract themselves. They look for something quick, something easy, something that gives immediate relief. But every time you escape discomfort, you train yourself to avoid growth. Because growth lives in that space, the space where things are unclear, where effort is required, where results are not immediate. And if you constantly avoid that space, you never build the depth required for wealth. This is why discipline matters, not as a punishment, but as protection. Protection against your own impulses, protection against distraction, protection against the silent leak. And here's the powerful shift. When you start protecting your attention, everything begins to change. You become more intentional, more aware, more in control. You stop reacting to everything around you and start choosing what matters. That's when your energy aligns. That's when your actions become consistent. That's when progress becomes real. Because now, you're not leaking, you're building, quietly, consistently, intentionally. Take a breath here, reflect again. What are the small things you've been ignoring? Because those small things are never small. They are the foundation of everything. And in the next chapter, we're going to go even deeper into something most people don't want to admit. The emotional patterns that destroy wealth faster than any external factor ever could. This is where the real game begins. Chapter 4. The emotional cost of money. Most people think wealth is a numbers game. Income, expenses, investments, returns. But beneath all of that, there is something far more powerful driving every financial decision you make. Emotion, quiet, invisible, constant. And if you don't understand it, it will control your behavior without you ever noticing. This is where the real losses begin, not in spreadsheets, but in reactions. Think about it. How many financial decisions are made in a state of calm, clarity, and patience? And how many are made in a moment of pressure, fear, excitement, or comparison? That's the difference. Because when emotion leads, logic follows behind. Too late, too weak, too quiet. And over time, those emotional decisions stack up. A purchase to feel better, an upgrade to feel successful, a risk taken out of excitement, a hesitation driven by fear. Each one seems justified in the moment, but collectively, they shape your financial reality. Now here's something most people don't want to admit. Money is often used as a tool, not to build a future, but to regulate emotion. Stress shows up. You spend to relieve it. Comparison hits. You upgrade to match it. Boredom creeps in. You consume to escape it, and slowly money becomes less about strategy and more about reaction. This is one of the most expensive habits you can develop because emotional spending doesn't just cost money, it costs awareness. And once awareness fades, patterns take over. Now pause here. Ask yourself honestly, when was the last time you made a financial decision purely from clarity? Not emotion, no pressure, no impulse, no external influence, just calm, intentional choice. If that feels rare, you're not alone. Because in today's world, everything is designed to trigger emotion. Advertising, social media, status signals, lifestyle displays, you are constantly being shown what you should have, what you're missing, what others are doing. And if you're not grounded, you start reacting, not thinking. And that reaction creates a loop. You feel something. You respond with spending. You get temporary relief. Then the feeling returns, and the cycle continues. This is not weakness. This is conditioning. But awareness breaks conditioning. The moment you start noticing the pattern, you create space. And in that space, you regain control. Now here's the shift. Instead of asking, can I afford this? Start asking, why do I want this right now? That question changes everything because it moves you from reaction to reflection, and reflection creates power. You begin to see the emotional triggers behind your decisions. You begin to recognize patterns that used to feel automatic. You begin to slow down. And in that slowing down, you start making better choices, not perfect choices, but intentional ones. And intention is what builds consistency. Now let's go deeper. Fear is one of the most destructive emotions in the wealth game. Fear of losing money, fear of missing out, fear of making the wrong move. And here's what fear does. It either makes you freeze or it makes you rush. Neither leads to clarity. Freezing keeps you stuck. Rushing leads to mistakes. And over time, both limit your growth. But there's another emotion that's just as dangerous. Ego, the need to appear successful, the need to keep up, the need to prove something. Ego doesn't just influence spending, it influences identity. It pushes you to build a life that looks impressive, even if it's not sustainable. And sustainability is the foundation of real wealth. Without it, everything becomes temporary. Now take a moment again. Look at your financial habits through an emotional lens, not just what you do, but why you do it. Because once you understand the emotional drivers, you gain something powerful: choice. You are no longer reacting blindly, you are responding consciously. And that shift is where real control begins. Because wealth is not just built through action, it's protected through awareness. And emotional awareness is one of the strongest forms of protection you can develop. In the next chapter, we're going to explore something even more subtle, something that shapes your financial future before you even realize it. Your environment, the people around you, the conversations you hear, the standards you absorb. Because whether you notice it or not, your environment is constantly influencing your decisions. And if you don't become aware of it, you may be building a life that was never truly yours to begin with. We're so glad you decided to watch our video. We're also really curious to know which cities around the world are watching our videos. Could you let us know which city, or at least which country, you're from? We always read every comment under our videos carefully. Thank you. Chapter 5. The environment that decides for you. You don't make decisions in isolation. It might feel like you do. It might feel like every financial choice you make is yours, independent, self-directed. But look closer. Look at the conversations you hear every day, the people you spend time with, the content you consume, the standards you've accepted as normal. All of it is shaping you, quietly, constantly. And if you're not aware of it, it's deciding for you. This is one of the most overlooked forces in the wealth game: environment. Because before you ever make a decision, your environment has already influenced what feels acceptable, what feels realistic, what feels possible, and most importantly, what feels enough. Think about it. If everyone around you is focused on spending, you normalize spending. If everyone is chasing status, you begin to value status. If everyone complains about money, you start believing struggle is inevitable. Not because you chose it, but because you absorbed it. This is how invisible conditioning works. It doesn't force you, it shapes you. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people are not building their financial life based on clear thinking. They're building it based on inherited patterns. Patterns from family, patterns from friends, patterns from culture. And unless you question those patterns, you repeat them, even if they don't serve you. This is why two people can earn the same income, but end up in completely different realities. Because one is intentional and the other is influenced. Now pause for a moment. Look at your environment honestly. What do people around you talk about when it comes to money? Is it growth or survival, ownership or consumption, strategy or struggle? Because whatever is repeated around you becomes familiar. And what's familiar feels safe, even if it's limiting. This is where awareness becomes your advantage. The moment you step back and observe your environment, you create distance, and distance allows you to think. Instead of automatically absorbing everything around you, you begin to evaluate it. You ask, is this helping me grow or keeping me comfortable? That question alone can change your trajectory, because growth rarely feels comfortable at first. It feels unfamiliar, it feels uncertain, it feels like stepping outside what you've always known. And most people avoid that. They stay within their environment, within their patterns, within their limits, not because they want to stay stuck, but because it feels safer. But here's the truth. Comfortable environments rarely produce uncomfortable growth, and without growth, there is no change. Now let's go deeper. Your environment is not just people, it's information. What you watch, what you read, what you listen to daily. Because information shapes perspective, and perspective shapes decisions. If you're constantly exposed to content that promotes instant gratification, you begin to value speed over strategy. If you're surrounded by noise, you lose clarity. If you're constantly comparing yourself to others, you lose direction. And when direction fades, you drift. This is how people lose years, not through failure, but through distraction. Now imagine something different. Imagine intentionally designing your environment, choosing what you expose yourself to, choosing who influences your thinking, choosing what standards you accept. That's power, because now you're not reacting to your environment, you're shaping it. And when you shape your environment, you shape your future. This doesn't mean cutting everyone off. It means becoming aware. It means protecting your mindset. It means making conscious decisions about what you allow into your space, because your space is where your life is built. Now take a moment again. Who are you listening to the most? And more importantly, are they building the kind of life you want? If not, why are you following their patterns? That question is not easy, but it's necessary, because once you see it, you can't unsee it, and that awareness is the beginning of change. In the next chapter, we're going to uncover something even more critical: the difference between ownership and participation, because this is where the wealth game truly separates people. Some play it, others control it, and once you understand that difference, you'll never look at money the same way again. Chapter 6. Ownership versus participation. There is a line most people never see. It doesn't show up on a paycheck. It's not written in a contract. No one points it out to you, but it exists. And once you see it, you realize why some people stay in the same cycle for decades, while others quietly break free. The line is simple: participation versus ownership. Most people spend their entire lives participating. They participate in jobs. They participate in systems. They participate in opportunities created by others. They show up, they contribute, they get rewarded. And there is nothing wrong with that. But here's the part that changes everything. Participation pays, only while you're present. Ownership pays, even when you're not. Let that settle, because this is where the wealth game begins to separate. When you participate, you trade time for value. Your income is directly tied to your effort. More time, more money. Less time, less money. It's linear, predictable, limited. But when you own, you step into a different dynamic. Now your effort is not just exchanged, it's multiplied, because ownership creates leverage, and leverage changes everything. Now, before you misunderstand this, ownership is not just about businesses or assets in the traditional sense. It's about control. Control over something that produces value, with or without your constant presence. That could be a system, a process, a skill that scales, an idea that continues to generate. But most people never reach this point. not because they lack ability, but because they stay focused on participation. They get good at earning. They get efficient. They become valuable in their roles. But they never step back and ask, what do I actually control? And that question is where the shift begins. Because control is what creates stability. Control is what creates options. Control is what creates freedom. Without it, you are always dependent on something external, a company, a client, a market condition, an opportunity you don't own. And dependency is fragile. It works until it doesn't. Now think about this. If your entire financial structure depends on someone else continuing to provide you with opportunity, who really holds the power, you or them? This is not about fear. This is about clarity. Because once you see this clearly, you stop relying on a single path. You start thinking differently. Instead of only asking, how can I perform better? You begin asking, what can I build that performs without me? That question is uncomfortable at first because it forces you to think beyond the immediate, beyond the next paycheck, beyond the next reward. It forces you to think long-term, and long-term thinking is rare. But it's also what separates those who stay in cycles from those who create systems. Now here's the deeper layer. Ownership requires patience because unlike participation, it doesn't always pay immediately. It takes time to build, time to refine, time to grow. And in a world that rewards speed, most people give up too early. They want results now. They want proof now. They want certainty now. But ownership doesn't work like that. It rewards consistency, clarity, persistence, and those qualities are built over time. This is why many people never cross the line, not because they can't, but because they don't stay long enough. They return to what feels familiar: participation, immediate reward, predictable structure, clear feedback. But in doing so, they stay in the same loop. Now pause again. Look at your current situation. Where are you participating and where are you owning? Be honest, because awareness here is everything. If all your income comes from participation, that's not a failure, but it is a signal that there's another layer to build, another level to reach. And once you begin that shift, everything changes. You start allocating your time differently. You start thinking in terms of creation, not just contribution. You start valuing control over convenience. And slowly, you begin stepping out of the cycle, not overnight, but intentionally. Because this is not about abandoning what you have. It's about expanding beyond it, building something alongside it, something that grows, something that compounds, something that continues. That's ownership. And once you experience even a small part of it, you will never look at income the same way again. In the next chapter, we're going to explore something that stops most people right here. Something internal, something quiet, but powerful. The fear of stepping beyond what feels certain. Because understanding the game is one thing. Playing it is another. Chapter 7. The fear that keeps you small. There's a moment that comes to almost everyone who starts seeing the wealth game clearly. A moment where everything begins to make sense. You understand the difference between income and control. You see the patterns. You recognize the traps. You start thinking differently, and then something stops you. Not outside, inside. A quiet hesitation, a subtle resistance, a voice that says, what if this doesn't work? What if I lose what I already have? What if I'm not ready? This is the moment where most people turn back, not because they lack knowledge, but because they encounter fear. And fear is one of the most powerful forces in the entire game. Not loud fear, not panic, but controlled, rational-sounding fear. The kind that feels like logic. The kind that sounds responsible. Stay where it's stable. Don't risk what you've built. Be realistic. And on the surface, that advice seems wise. But underneath, it can become a cage. Because here's the truth. Security without growth eventually becomes limitation. If everything you build is designed only to protect what you have, you never expand beyond it. And over time, that protection turns into restriction. Now understand this clearly. Fear is not the enemy. It's information. It shows you where uncertainty exists. It highlights where growth is possible. But if you treat fear as a stop sign instead of a signal, you stay exactly where you are. And in the wealth game, staying still is often the slowest form of loss. Because the world keeps moving. Opportunities evolve. Systems change. Environments shift. And if you don't adapt, you fall behind without realizing it. Now think about this. How many times have you had an idea, a direction, a possibility, and you didn't act on it? Not because it was impossible, but because it felt uncertain. That's fear at work. And the longer you listen to it without questioning it, the stronger it becomes. It builds patterns. You start avoiding discomfort. You start choosing predictability. You start staying within known limits. And slowly, your potential shrinks to match your comfort zone. This is how people stay stuck for years. Not through failure, but through avoidance. Now here's the shift. Instead of asking, what if this goes wrong? Start asking, what happens if I never try? That question changes the direction of your thinking, because now you're not just protecting the present, you're considering the cost of inaction. And that cost is often much higher than the risk. Lost time, missed opportunities, unrealized growth, things you can't recover because time doesn't pause. Now let's go deeper. There are two types of risk: the risk of action and the risk of staying the same. Most people focus only on the first. They analyze every possible downside of moving forward, but they ignore the second, the silent risk. The risk of repeating the same year again and again. The risk of staying in systems you don't control. The risk of building a life that depends entirely on consistency without flexibility. And that risk feels safe because it's familiar. But familiarity is not the same as security. Real security comes from adaptability, from growth, from awareness, from the ability to adjust when things change. And that only comes when you step beyond what's comfortable. Now, this doesn't mean reckless action. It doesn't mean abandoning stability. It means calculated movement, intentional steps, small expansions. Because growth is not about jumping into the unknown blindly. It's about moving forward with awareness, testing, learning, adjusting, and over time building confidence, not from thinking, but from doing. Now pause again. What are you avoiding right now? Not what you say you'll do someday, but what you already know you should explore and haven't. That's your edge. That's where growth is waiting. And the longer you delay it, the more it costs you. Because fear doesn't just stop action. It delays progress, and delayed progress is lost time. Now, here's the powerful realization. Confidence does not come before action. It comes after it. You don't wait until you feel ready. You move, and readiness develops. You act, and clarity forms. You step forward, and fear loses its grip. That's how you expand. That's how you grow. That's how you move from understanding the game to actually playing it. And once you take that step, even a small one, something shifts inside you. You realize you're not as limited as you thought. You're not as stuck as you felt. And that realization is the beginning of momentum. In the next chapter, we're going to build on that momentum. We're going to explore how small, consistent actions quietly reshape your entire financial trajectory. Because in the wealth game, big changes rarely come from big moments. They come from small decisions, repeated with intention. Chapter 8. The Power of Small Decisions. Most people are waiting for a breakthrough, a big opportunity, a sudden change, a moment that shifts everything at once. But the truth is quieter than that. Wealth is not built in moments. It is built in patterns. And patterns are made of small decisions. Decisions so small, they often feel insignificant. What you do with 1 hour, what you do with one impulse, what you do with one moment of awareness. Individually, they don't look like much. But over time, they become everything. This is one of the biggest misunderstandings in the wealth game. People look for big moves, but they ignore the small ones. And the small ones are the ones that compound. Think about this. A single decision to delay gratification. A single decision to focus instead of distract. A single decision to invest in something that grows. It doesn't feel life-changing, but repeat it. It becomes a trajectory, and trajectory is what determines where you end up. Now let's flip it. A single impulsive purchase, a single distraction, a single moment of avoiding what matters also doesn't feel significant, but repeated. It creates a different trajectory, and that's where people lose wealth, not in one dramatic mistake, but in a series of small, comfortable decisions that slowly move them off course. This is why awareness at the micro level matters, because that's where the game is actually played, not in big moments, but in daily habits. Now pause here. Look at your last 24 hours, not your intentions, your actions. What did your time go into? What did your energy go into? What did your focus go into? Because those answers are a preview of your future. And most people don't like that realization because it removes the illusion. It shows them that the future is not something that just happens. It's something that is built day by day, choice by choice. Now here's the empowering part. If small decisions create the problem, small decisions can also create the solution. You don't need to change everything at once. You need to change direction, even slightly, because a small shift in direction over time leads to a completely different destination. This is how real transformation happens, not through intensity, but through consistency. And consistency is built through simplicity, clear decisions, repeatable actions, sustainable habits. Now let's go deeper. Why do most people struggle with consistency? Because they rely on motivation. And motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes. It depends on mood, energy, circumstances. But discipline is different. Discipline is a decision, a commitment, something you do, regardless of how you feel. And that's where small decisions become powerful, because discipline shows up in the small moments, when no one is watching, when it doesn't feel urgent, when the reward is not immediate. That's where patterns are formed. That's where identity is shaped. Now imagine this. Every day, you make one decision that moves you forward. Not a massive leap, just a step. Focused work instead of distraction. Intentional thinking instead of reaction. Building instead of consuming. At first, nothing dramatic happens, but over time, momentum builds. And momentum changes everything. Because once you have momentum, progress becomes easier. Clarity becomes stronger. Confidence becomes natural. And suddenly, what once felt difficult becomes part of who you are. This is the hidden advantage, not talent, not luck, but consistency. Now ask yourself, what is one small decision you can start repeating every day? Not something overwhelming, something simple, something real, because that's where it begins. And once it begins, it builds, quietly, powerfully, unstoppably. Now here's the deeper layer. Small decisions don't just affect your actions, they affect your identity. Every time you follow through, you reinforce a belief. I am someone who does what I say. And that belief is powerful because identity drives behavior. If you see yourself as disciplined, you act disciplined. If you see yourself as focused, you act focused. And those actions create results. This is how the wealth game is won, not by chasing outcomes, but by becoming the person who produces them consistently. Take a moment. Let that settle, because this is not about doing more. It's about doing differently, with awareness, with intention, with repetition. And in the next chapter, we're going to take this even further. We're going to explore the concept of time and why most people underestimate its role in building or losing wealth. Because time is not just passing, it's compounding. And whether it's working for you or against you depends entirely on how you use it. We'd also like to remind you that we have a private members community on our channel. All members can vote on the topic of the next video, have priority in the comment section, and, most importantly, gain access to exclusive videos and lessons covering the most relevant topics and information specific to this month. Thank you. Let's keep moving forward. Chapter 9. Time is either building you or breaking you. Every person on this planet is given the same 24 hours. No one gets more. No one gets less. And yet, some people use time to build freedom, while others use time to reinforce cycles. That difference is not about luck. It's about awareness, because time is not just passing. Time is compounding. Every action you take, every habit you repeat, every decision you make is being multiplied by time, quietly, constantly, relentlessly. And here's the truth most people don't fully grasp. Time doesn't care about your intentions. It only responds to your actions. You can plan all day, you can think all day, you can promise yourself change, but if your actions don't shift, time will compound your current patterns, not your desired future, your current behavior. Now pause for a second. If nothing in your life changed, if you kept living exactly the same way for the next 5 years, where would you end up? Not where you hope, not where you imagine, but where your current patterns are leading. That answer is your real trajectory. And for many people, that realization is uncomfortable because it reveals something they've been avoiding. That time is not neutral, it's directional. It either moves you forward or it moves you deeper into the same place. Now here's where it gets powerful. Most people think of time as something they spend, but in reality, time is something you invest. Every hour you use is either creating something or consuming something, and over time, That difference becomes massive. 1 hour of focused effort, 1 hour of learning, 1 hour of building, repeated daily, turns into transformation. But 1 hour of distraction, 1 hour of mindless consumption, 1 hour of avoidance, repeated daily, turns into stagnation. The difference is small in the moment, but huge in the long run. That's the nature of compounding. It starts invisible, then it becomes undeniable. Now let's go deeper. Why do most people underestimate time? Because the results are delayed. You don't see immediate consequences. You don't feel immediate loss. So it's easy to ignore, easy to delay, easy to say, I'll start tomorrow. But tomorrow turns into repetition, and repetition becomes years. This is how people wake up one day and realize nothing has changed. Not because they didn't try, but because they didn't stay consistent long enough for time to work in their favor. Now imagine something different. Imagine using time intentionally, not perfectly, but consciously. You begin protecting certain hours. You begin choosing where your energy goes. You begin treating time like the most valuable asset you have, because it is. Money can be earned again. Opportunities can return. But time, once spent, is gone. And that's why the wealth game is deeply connected to time awareness, because the people who build wealth understand something others overlook. They respect time at a different level. They don't just ask, what do I feel like doing? They ask, what is this hour building? That question alone can change your life, because it forces clarity, it forces intention, it forces direction. Now, here's another layer. Time doesn't just compound actions. It compounds identity. The more you repeat something, the more it becomes part of who you are. If you consistently focus, you become focused. If you consistently distract yourself, you become distracted. If you consistently build, you become a builder. And identity is what sustains behavior. Not motivation, not emotion, identity. That's why time is so powerful, because it's shaping you every single day, whether you notice it or not. Now take a moment again. Look at your daily routine. What is it reinforcing? What identity is it building? Because whatever you repeat is who you become, and who you become determines what you build. This is the deeper game, not just managing money, but managing yourself, managing your time, your focus, your direction. Because wealth is not just external, it's internal. It's built through habits, through awareness, through consistency, and time is the force that amplifies all of it. Now here's the key realization. You don't need more time. You need more intention with the time you already have. Because small, intentional hours compound faster than random scattered days. And once you understand that, you stop waiting. You stop delaying. You start acting, not in big bursts, but in steady, consistent movement. And that movement creates momentum. In the next chapter, we're going to explore momentum itself, how it builds, how it breaks, and why most people lose it right when they need it the most. Because momentum is what turns effort into results. And without it, even the best intentions fall apart. Chapter 10, Momentum, the invisible engine. There's a phase in every journey where things start to move, not dramatically, not instantly, but noticeably. You begin to feel progress. You begin to see small results. You begin to believe this is working. That feeling is momentum, and momentum is one of the most powerful forces in the wealth game. Because when you have it, everything becomes easier. Decisions feel clearer. Action feels natural. Consistency feels automatic. You don't have to force yourself as much. You're already in motion. But here's the part most people don't understand. Momentum is fragile. It takes time to build, but it can be lost quickly. And most people lose it right when it starts to matter. Now think about this. Have you ever started something strong? A new habit, a new direction, a new level of focus. And for a while, you were locked in. You were disciplined, you were consistent, you were making progress, and then something small happened. You skipped a day, you got distracted, you lost focus for a moment, and instead of recovering, you stopped. Not completely at first, but gradually, and before you knew it, the momentum was gone. That's the pattern, not failure, but interruption. Because momentum is not destroyed by big events. It's lost through small breaks in consistency, and once it breaks, starting again feels harder. Now here's why. Momentum reduces resistance. When you're already moving, it takes less energy to keep going. But when you stop, resistance returns. Doubt returns. Laziness returns. Distraction becomes stronger. And restarting feels like climbing uphill again. This is why protecting momentum is more important than building it. Let that sink in. Because most people focus only on starting. They get motivated, they take action, they push hard in the beginning, but they don't think about maintenance. They don't think about what happens after the excitement fades. And when it does, they fall back. This is where discipline becomes critical. Not at the beginning, but in the middle. When things are no longer new, when results are not immediate, when motivation fades, that's where momentum is either sustained or lost. Now here's the shift. Instead of aiming for perfection, aim for continuity, not flawless execution, but consistent presence, even if it's small, even if it's not your best, even if it's just showing up. Because showing up maintains momentum, and momentum creates results. Now let's go deeper. Why do people break momentum? Because they attach too much pressure to performance. They think, if I can't do it perfectly, it's not worth doing. If I miss one day, I've already failed. If I can't give full effort, I'll wait. And that thinking destroys continuity because it creates all or nothing behavior. You're either fully on or completely off. And life doesn't work like that. There will be days when you're tired, days when things don't go as planned, days when your energy is low. And if your system depends on perfection, it will break. But if your system is built on consistency, it survives. Because consistency adapts. It adjusts. It continues, even when conditions are not ideal. That's the difference. Now imagine this. Instead of stopping when things get hard, you reduce the scale, but keep moving. Instead of quitting, you adjust. Instead of losing momentum, you protect it. That's how progress becomes sustainable. That's how you build something real. Because real growth is not about intensity, it's about endurance. Now pause here. Think about something you've started and stopped. Not because it didn't work, but because you broke momentum. What would happen if you simply continued, even at a slower pace, even imperfectly? Just continued. That's the power of momentum. It doesn't require perfection. It requires persistence. Now, here's the deeper layer. Momentum doesn't just apply to actions. It applies to thinking. If you consistently think with clarity, you build mental momentum. If you consistently focus, you build cognitive strength. If you consistently act with intention, you build identity. And once identity aligns with action, momentum becomes natural. You're no longer forcing yourself. You're becoming someone who moves forward by default. That's when the game changes. Now here's the truth. Most people don't fail because they can't succeed. They fail because they stop too soon. They lose momentum before results appear, and results always lag behind effort. That's the rule. There is always a delay, and if you quit in that delay, you never see the outcome. This is where patience becomes essential. Not passive patience, active patience, continuing to move, even when results are not visible yet. Trusting the process, without immediate confirmation. That's where most people drop off. But those who stay, those who protect momentum, those who continue when it's quiet, they reach a point where everything starts to align. Results appear, confidence grows, opportunities expand, and suddenly, what once felt difficult feels natural. That's momentum at full force, and once you reach that level, you don't want to lose it. In the next chapter, we're going to explore something that silently destroys momentum for millions of people. Comparison, the constant habit of measuring yourself against others, and how it quietly pulls you out of your own path without you even realizing it. Chapter 11, the trap of comparison. There is a quiet habit that destroys more progress than failure ever could. It doesn't look dangerous. It doesn't feel destructive at first. In fact, it feels natural. Comparison. Looking at someone else's life, someone else's success, someone else's progress, and measuring yourself against it. Now, here's the problem. You are not seeing their full story. You are seeing a moment, a highlight, a curated version of reality, but your mind treats it as the whole picture. And from that incomplete view, you begin to judge your own path. You start asking questions like, why am I not there yet? What am I doing wrong? Why is it easier for them? And slowly, your focus shifts away from your own direction and toward someone else's. This is where momentum breaks. Not because you stopped working, but because you stopped trusting your path. And trust is essential, because without trust, every step feels uncertain. Every delay feels like failure. Every challenge feels like proof that you're behind. Now understand this clearly. Comparison doesn't just affect your emotions. It affects your decisions. You start chasing what looks good instead of what is right for you. You start switching direction instead of staying consistent. You start reacting instead of building. And that reaction destroys alignment, because wealth is not built by copying others. It's built by understanding your own position and moving with intention from there. Now pause for a moment. Think about the last time you compared yourself to someone. What happened after that? Did it give you clarity? Or did it create pressure? Did it help you move forward? Or did it make you question everything? Because for most people, comparison doesn't create growth. It creates doubt, and doubt slows action. Now here's the deeper issue. Comparison shifts your time horizon. Instead of thinking long-term, you start focusing on short-term results. You see someone ahead, and you feel behind, even if you're exactly where you should be, even if you've made real progress. That distortion is dangerous because it pushes you to rush, to force outcomes, to skip steps. And in the wealth game, rushing often leads to mistakes because real growth takes time. It compounds. It builds quietly. And if you keep interrupting your path to chase someone else's pace, you never reach your own potential. Now let's go deeper. Why is comparison so powerful? Because it triggers emotion, ego, Insecurity, desire. It makes you feel something. And when you feel something strongly, you react. But reaction is not strategy. It's impulse. And impulse breaks consistency. Now here's the shift. Instead of comparing your life to others, start measuring your life against your own standards, your growth, your discipline, your direction. Because that's where real progress exists, not in how you rank against others, but in how you evolve over time. Now imagine this. Instead of asking, am I ahead or behind them? You ask, am I better than I was yesterday? That question changes everything because it brings focus back to you, back to your actions, back to your path. And when your focus returns, your momentum returns. Now here's something important. There is a difference between inspiration and comparison. Inspiration expands you. It shows you what's possible. It motivates you to grow. Comparison contracts you. It makes you feel smaller. It creates pressure. It pulls you out of alignment. Learn to recognize the difference because one builds and the other breaks. Now take a moment again. Who are you watching and how is it affecting you? Is it pushing you forward or pulling you off track? Because whatever you consistently expose yourself to will shape your mindset, and your mindset shapes your outcomes. This is why protecting your focus matters, because your focus is your direction, and your direction determines your destination. Now here's the truth. There will always be someone ahead, someone faster, someone more successful, someone further along. But their path is not yours. Their timing is not yours. Their journey is not yours. And the moment you fully accept that, you regain control. You stop chasing. You stop comparing. You start building quietly, consistently, intentionally. That's where real progress happens. In alignment, not in competition. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to uncover something even more critical. The concept of lifestyle inflation. How success itself can become the very thing that holds you back. Because sometimes the biggest threat to wealth is not failure, it's success without awareness. If you appreciate our efforts and our thoughts, subscribe and like this video. We need to show the world that there are many people like us. We must always continue to improve. Chapter 12. When success becomes the trap. There is a moment in the wealth journey that feels like victory. Income increases, opportunities expand, life improves. You finally feel like things are working, and for a while, they are. But hidden inside that success is a new risk, one that most people never see coming, because it doesn't feel like a problem, it feels like progress. This is the trap of lifestyle inflation, and it has quietly erased more wealth than failure ever has. Now, understand this clearly. There is nothing wrong with improving your life, nothing wrong with enjoying the results of your work. But the problem begins when your lifestyle grows faster than your awareness, when every increase in income automatically becomes an increase in spending, when success turns into expansion without control. That's where the shift happens, because now you're no longer building wealth. You're maintaining a lifestyle, and maintenance requires consistency, more income to support more expenses, more effort to sustain more commitments, and suddenly the freedom you were moving toward becomes something you have to protect. This is where many people get stuck, not at the beginning, but after they start succeeding. Because early on, you're focused, you're intentional, you're careful. But as things improve, you relax, you reward yourself, you upgrade, and slowly your baseline changes. What once felt like luxury now feels normal. What once felt like enough now feels average. And without realizing it, you build a life that requires more just to feel the same. That's the trap. Now pause for a moment. Look at your own progression. As your income increased, what changed? Did your control increase or did your commitments increase? Because those are not the same. One builds freedom, the other builds pressure. Now here's the deeper issue. Lifestyle inflation doesn't just affect your money, it affects your mindset. You start associating success with external upgrades, better things, better appearances, better signals, and those signals become expectations, not just from others, but from yourself. You feel like you need to maintain a certain image, a certain standard, and that pressure limits your flexibility. Because now, every decision is influenced by what you've built around you. You can't easily step back. You can't easily adjust. You can't easily reduce. Because everything is connected. This is how people become trapped inside their own success. Now, here's the shift. Instead of letting your lifestyle automatically follow your income, separate them consciously. Let your income grow, but let your lifestyle grow slower, with intention, with awareness. Because the gap between what you earn and what you need is where control lives. That gap is what gives you options. Options to invest, options to build, options to step back when needed, and without that gap, you're always running, even at higher levels. Now think about this. Two people earn the same amount. One spends most of it maintaining a high lifestyle. The other spends less and builds assets with the difference. Who has more freedom? It's not about the number. It's about the structure. Now let's go deeper. Why is lifestyle inflation so tempting? Because it feels like reward. You've worked hard. You've earned more. You want to enjoy it. That's natural. But the problem is not the reward. It's the automatic reaction, the lack of intention. Because without intention, reward becomes habit. And habit becomes expectation. And expectation becomes dependency. Now here's the powerful realization. You don't need to prove your success by displaying it. You don't need to match anyone else's standard. You don't need to upgrade everything just because you can. Because real wealth is not about how your life looks. It's about how your life works. And if your life only works at a certain level of income, you're still dependent. Now take a moment again. Ask yourself honestly, is your lifestyle supporting your future or consuming your progress? Because that answer will determine everything. Now here's the deeper layer. The more you reduce unnecessary expansion, the more you increase clarity. You start seeing opportunities differently. You start thinking long-term. You start valuing control over appearance. And that shift changes your trajectory because now you're not just earning, you're positioning. And positioning is what creates lasting wealth. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to explore one of the most misunderstood concepts in the entire wealth game: leverage. What it really means, how it works, and why most people use it incorrectly or avoid it completely. Because leverage, when understood, can multiply everything. But when misunderstood, can destroy everything. And that's where the game becomes even more precise. Chapter 13. Leverage, the multiplier most people misuse. There is a word that sounds powerful, a word that gets repeated in conversations about success, growth, and wealth. leverage. And most people hear it without truly understanding it. Because leverage is not just about doing more, it's about multiplying what you already do. And when used correctly, it can accelerate everything. But when misunderstood, it can amplify mistakes just as quickly. This is where precision matters. Now let's simplify it. Leverage means getting more output from the same input, more results from the same effort, more value from the same time, more impact from the same action. It's not about working harder, it's about working in a way that scales. And that's the difference most people miss, because they stay focused on effort, more hours, more tasks, more activity. But effort without leverage is limited. There are only so many hours in a day, only so much energy you can give. And once you reach that limit, growth slows down. This is where leverage changes the equation. Now, your effort doesn't just produce once, it produces repeatedly. It continues, it compounds. Now, here's the key understanding. Leverage comes in different forms. Time leverage, skill leverage, system leverage, capital leverage. But at its core, it's about creating something that extends beyond your direct effort, something that works even when you're not actively working. Now pause here. Think about how you currently operate. How much of what you do only works when you're doing it, and how much continues after you stop? That difference is leverage. Now let's go deeper. Why do most people struggle with leverage? Because it requires delayed gratification. It requires building something before it pays off. And in a world focused on immediate results, that's uncomfortable. People want quick returns, fast feedback, instant progress. But leverage doesn't always provide that. It requires patience, consistency, and trust in the process. That's why many people avoid it. They stay in direct effort because it's predictable. You work, you get paid. Simple, clear, immediate, but limited. Now here's where it gets dangerous. Some people try to use leverage without understanding it. They take on too much risk. They expand too quickly. They multiply something that isn't stable yet. And when that happens, leverage works against them, because leverage doesn't care what it multiplies. It amplifies whatever is there. If your foundation is strong, leverage accelerates growth. If your foundation is weak, leverage accelerates failure. That's why awareness is critical. Before you scale anything, you need to stabilize it. Before you multiply effort, you need to understand it. Because scaling confusion creates bigger confusion. Scaling inconsistency creates bigger instability. Now here's the shift. Instead of asking, how can I do more? Start asking, how can I make what I do work more than once? That question changes everything, because it moves you from effort to structure, from activity to strategy. Now imagine this. You build something once, and it continues to produce. You refine a process, and it becomes repeatable. You create a system, and it operates independently. That's leverage, and over time, those small systems stack. They build on each other, they create layers, and those layers become something powerful, because now you're not just working, you're building. Now, here's the deeper layer. Leverage is not just external, it's internal. Your thinking, your habits, your discipline, because the way you think also compounds. If you develop clear thinking, it influences every decision. If you build discipline, it affects every action. If you create focus, it multiplies your effectiveness. That's internal leverage, and it's just as important, because without it, external leverage becomes unstable. Now take a moment again. Where in your life can you begin creating leverage? Not something massive, something small, something repeatable, something that continues, because that's where it starts. And once it starts, it builds quietly, powerfully, consistently. Now here's the truth. Leverage is what separates effort from scalability. It's what allows growth to continue without constant expansion of time. And in the wealth game, that's essential, because without leverage, you are always trading. With leverage, you are building, and building is what creates lasting wealth. In the next chapter, we're going to explore something that determines how effectively you use leverage: your ability to focus. Because leverage without focus becomes scattered, and scattered effort never compounds the way it should. This is where clarity becomes your greatest advantage. Chapter 14. Focus, the gatekeeper of growth. There is a reason most people never fully benefit from leverage. It's not because they don't understand it. It's because they can't sustain focus long enough for leverage to work. Focus is not just about attention, it's about direction. It's about deciding what matters and staying with it long enough for it to grow. But in today's world, focus is under constant attack. Notifications, distractions, endless information, constant comparison. Your attention is being pulled in every direction, all the time. And when your attention is scattered, your results become scattered too. Because leverage requires concentration. It requires depth. It requires staying with something even when it's not exciting, even when it's not new, even when it feels slow. And that's where most people fall off. They start strong. They explore an idea. They begin building something. But before it matures, they shift. A new opportunity appears. A new idea feels more exciting. A new distraction pulls their attention. And just like that, momentum breaks. Leverage collapses, and they start again. This cycle is one of the biggest hidden reasons people lose wealth. Not because they lack ideas, but because they don't stay with one long enough to turn it into something real. Now pause for a moment. Look at your own patterns. How many things have you started but not fully developed? How many directions have you explored but not committed to? Because every time you switch, you reset the process. You lose accumulated effort. You lose momentum. And most importantly, you lose compounding. This is why focus is a multiplier. Not because it creates something instantly, but because it allows something to grow over time. Now here's the deeper truth. Focus is not about doing everything. It's about doing fewer things with greater intention. It's about saying no to protect what matters. And that's difficult because saying no feels like missing out. But saying yes to everything means you commit to nothing. And without commitment, nothing compounds. Now let's go deeper. Why is focus so hard to maintain? Because your mind is wired for novelty. It seeks stimulation. It seeks change. It seeks immediate feedback. But growth does not always provide that. Growth is often repetitive, slow, uncertain, delayed, and without discipline. Your mind drifts. It looks for something easier, something faster, something more exciting. But those shifts come at a cost, because every time you leave something unfinished, you weaken your ability to stay. And the ability to stay is what builds depth. Now imagine this. You choose one direction, not forever, but for long enough. You commit, you focus, you remove distractions, And you stay with it, day after day, even when it feels slow, even when results are not immediate. What happens? Clarity increases, skill improves, understanding deepens, efficiency grows. And over time, what once felt difficult becomes natural. That's focus at work. Now combine that with leverage. Now your focused effort is being multiplied. Now your consistency is creating systems. Now your direction is producing results that continue. That's where the shift happens. From effort to structure, from action to outcome. Now here's the key realization. You don't need more opportunities. You need more focus on the ones you already have. Because opportunities without focus turn into distraction, but focus turns opportunity into results. Now take a moment again. What are you currently focused on? And more importantly, is your focus consistent or scattered? Because scattered focus leads to scattered results, but concentrated focus leads to exponential growth. Now, here's something powerful. Focus is not about intensity, it's about protection. Protecting your time, protecting your attention, protecting your direction. Because what you protect, you grow. And what you neglect, you lose. Now here's the deeper layer. Focus is also emotional. It requires resisting impulses, resisting distractions, resisting the urge to constantly switch. And that resistance builds discipline, because every time you choose to stay instead of shift, you strengthen control. And control is what allows you to build consistently. Now understand this clearly. Most people don't fail because they choose the wrong thing. They fail because they don't stay with the right thing long enough. And in the wealth game, time and focus together create compounding. Without them, nothing scales. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to explore something that quietly determines whether your focus leads to growth or burnout. Energy. Because focus without energy cannot be sustained. And without sustainability, nothing lasts. This is where balance meets discipline, and where most people either break or build something that continues. Chapter 15. Energy. The fuel behind everything. You can have the best strategy, the clearest direction, the strongest intentions. But if you don't have the energy to sustain it, none of it lasts. This is where many people quietly break. Not because they lack knowledge, not because they lack discipline, but because they run out of energy. And energy is not just physical, it's mental, it's emotional, it's psychological. It's the force that allows you to focus, to act, to stay consistent. And without it, everything slows down. Now here's the problem. Most people treat energy as something that just comes and goes. They don't manage it. They react to it. They work when they feel good. They stop when they feel tired. They push until they burn out. And then they reset. This cycle destroys consistency because consistency requires sustainability. And sustainability requires energy awareness. Now pause for a moment. Think about your own patterns. When do you feel most focused? When do you feel drained? When do you lose clarity? Because those moments are not random, they are signals. Signals about how you're managing your energy. Now, here's the deeper truth. Energy is built through habits, not motivation. What you eat, how you sleep, how you think, what you consume mentally, all of it affects your ability to perform. And in the wealth game, performance is not occasional, it's consistent. That's the difference. Now let's go deeper. There are 3 types of energy you need to manage: physical energy, mental energy, emotional energy. And if even one of them is neglected, your system weakens. Physical energy is your baseline. If your body is tired, your mind struggles. If your body is weak, your focus drops. This is why discipline starts here. Sleep, movement, nutrition, not as trends, as foundations. Because without them, everything else becomes harder. Now, mental energy. This is your ability to think clearly, to make decisions, to stay focused. And here's what drains it the most: overload. Too much information, too many decisions, too many distractions. Your brain is constantly processing, switching, reacting, and every time you switch, you lose energy. This is called cognitive fatigue, and it's one of the biggest reasons people feel exhausted, without doing anything physically demanding. Now, emotional energy. This is the most overlooked because emotions affect everything. Stress, anxiety, frustration. If not managed, they drain you faster than anything else. They reduce clarity. They increase impulsive decisions. They break focus. And over time, they lead to burnout. Now here's the key realization. You don't just need to work harder, you need to work with energy. Align your most important tasks with your highest energy moments. Protect your mental space from unnecessary noise. Manage your emotions instead of reacting to them. That's how you sustain performance. Now imagine this. Instead of forcing yourself to push constantly, you build a rhythm. You work when your energy is high. You recover when needed. You maintain balance. That's how consistency becomes sustainable, because you're not draining yourself, you're managing yourself. Now here's the deeper layer. Energy affects discipline. When your energy is low, everything feels harder. Focus becomes difficult. Decisions become slower. Distractions become more tempting. And that's when most people break. Not because they lack discipline, but because they lack energy. Now take a moment again. Where are you losing energy daily? Is it through distraction, overthinking, poor habits, unnecessary stress? Because identifying that is the first step, and once you see it, you can start adjusting. Now, here's something powerful. When your energy is aligned, everything becomes easier. Focus sharpens. Decisions improve. Consistency strengthens. And suddenly, you're not forcing yourself anymore. You're flowing. That's when real progress happens. Now understand this clearly. Wealth is not just built through strategy. It's built through sustained execution. And sustained execution requires energy. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to explore something that ties everything together. Clarity. Because without clarity, even high energy becomes wasted effort. And clarity is what turns action into direction. This is where the game becomes precise. Chapter 16. Clarity, the force that aligns everything. You can have energy, you can have discipline, you can even have momentum. But without clarity, you will still feel lost. Because clarity is what gives direction to everything else. It's what tells you where to go, what to focus on, what to ignore. And without it, you end up moving, but not progressing. This is one of the most frustrating places to be. You're working, you're trying, you're doing what you believe is right, but something feels off. Because effort without clarity creates confusion, and confusion leads to inconsistency. Now pause for a moment. Have you ever felt like you're doing a lot, but not getting closer to where you want to be? That's not a lack of effort. That's a lack of clarity. Because when you're clear, your actions align, your decisions simplify, Your focus sharpens. You stop second-guessing everything, and you start moving with intention. Now, here's the deeper truth. Clarity is not something you wait for. It's something you build. Through thinking, through reflection, through honest evaluation. But most people avoid that because clarity requires facing reality. It requires asking difficult questions. Questions like, what am I actually building? Why am I doing this? Where is this leading? And those questions are uncomfortable because they force you to confront the truth, not the version you tell others, not the version you tell yourself, but the real one. Now here's where it gets powerful. The moment you face reality, you gain control because now you're no longer guessing, you're deciding, and decision creates direction. Now let's go deeper. Why do people avoid clarity? Because confusion feels easier. In confusion, you don't have to commit. You don't have to take full responsibility. You can stay in motion without making a clear choice. But that comes at a cost, because without clarity, every step feels uncertain, every decision feels heavy, every delay feels like doubt. And over time, that drains your energy. Now here's the shift. Instead of trying to do more, start by getting clear. Clear on what matters, clear on what doesn't, clear on what you're building and why. Because once you're clear, everything else becomes easier. You stop chasing distractions. You stop reacting to everything. You stop overthinking every move. You simply act in alignment. Now imagine this. You wake up and you know exactly what needs to be done. Not everything, but the important things. You don't waste time deciding. You don't drift into distraction. You move with purpose. That's clarity. And over time, that kind of movement compounds. Now, here's something deeper. Clarity reduces friction. It removes unnecessary decisions. It simplifies your path. And when friction is reduced, momentum increases. That's how everything connects. Now, here's the key realization. Clarity is not about knowing everything. It's about knowing enough to take the next step and trusting yourself to adjust along the way, because clarity grows through action, not before it. Now take a moment again. Where are you unclear right now? Not everything, just one area. What is causing hesitation? What is causing doubt? Because that's where you need to focus, not on doing more, but on understanding more. Now here's something powerful. When you gain clarity in one area, it spreads. Your thinking improves, your decisions strengthen, your confidence grows, and suddenly, you're not stuck anymore. You're moving. Now understand this clearly. Most people don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because they lack direction. And direction comes from clarity. Now in the next chapter, we're going to explore something that determines whether your clarity leads to results or stays as potential. Execution. Because knowing what to do is only the beginning. Doing it consistently is where everything changes, and this is where the wealth game becomes real. Chapter 17. Execution. Where most people break. There is a gap between knowing and doing, between understanding and applying, between intention and reality. And that gap is where most people lose. Because knowledge alone does not change your life. Clarity alone does not build wealth. Even motivation does not guarantee results. Execution does. Consistent, repeated, intentional execution. That's where everything becomes real. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people already know enough. They've read, they've learned, they've listened, They understand what they should do, but they don't do it consistently. And that inconsistency is the real problem. Not lack of information, but lack of execution. Now pause for a moment. Think about your own life. What do you already know that you're not applying? Not everything, just one thing, because that one thing is your starting point. Now, here's the deeper issue. Why is execution so difficult? Because it requires discipline in moments when you don't feel like it, when it's inconvenient, when it's uncomfortable, when there's no immediate reward. That's where execution separates people, not in what they know, but in what they do when it's hard. Now understand this clearly. Execution is not about intensity, it's about reliability. Showing up, even when it's not perfect, even when it's not your best, even when progress feels slow. Because progress is not always visible in the beginning. And if you depend on visible results, you'll stop too early. Now let's go deeper. Execution is built on systems, not feelings. If you rely on motivation, you will fail, because motivation fluctuates. But systems create structure. They remove decision fatigue. They reduce friction. They make action automatic. This is why high performers don't rely on willpower. They build systems, clear routines, defined actions, repeatable steps. And once those systems are in place, execution becomes easier. Now imagine this. Instead of deciding every day, you follow a structure. You know what to do. You know when to do it. You simply execute. That's power. Because you remove uncertainty. And uncertainty is what causes hesitation. Now here's the shift. Instead of asking, how do I feel today? Ask, what does the system require today? That question changes everything, because it removes emotion from execution. And when emotion is removed, consistency increases. Now here's something deeper. Execution builds identity. Every time you follow through, you reinforce who you are. I am someone who executes. I am someone who follows through. I am someone who builds. And that identity becomes your standard, not something you think about, something you live. Now take a moment again. Where are you inconsistent? Not where you failed, where you stopped showing up. Because that's where execution needs to be rebuilt. Now here's something important. Execution doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be consistent. Because perfection delays action, but consistency builds results. Now imagine this. You execute daily, not massively, but consistently. You take steps. You follow through. You stay aligned. What happens? Momentum builds. Clarity improves. Confidence grows. And over time, results appear. Not suddenly, but steadily. That's real progress. Now here's the truth. Most people don't fail because they can't succeed. They fail because they don't execute long enough for success to appear, because success is delayed always. There is always a gap between effort and outcome. And if you stop in that gap, you never reach the result. Now understand this clearly. Execution is not glamorous. It's repetitive. It's quiet. It's often unnoticed. But it's powerful because it compounds. And over time, it creates something undeniable. Now here's the deeper layer. Execution requires honesty. You have to be honest with yourself about your effort, about your consistency, about your results. Because without honesty, you stay in illusion. You think you're doing enough when you're not. And that illusion keeps you stuck. Now take a breath here. Ask yourself, am I executing or just thinking about it? Because that answer determines everything. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to explore something that protects execution over time: resilience. Because no matter how strong your system is, there will be moments when things break, moments when you feel like stopping, moments when everything feels harder than it should. And how you respond in those moments determines whether you continue or collapse. That's where the real test begins. Chapter 18, Resilience, the ability to continue. There will be moments when everything feels heavier than it should, moments where your energy drops, your focus weakens, your motivation disappears, moments where you question everything. Is this even working? Is it worth it? Should I just stop? These moments are not signs that you're failing. They are part of the process, and how you respond to them determines everything. This is where resilience comes in, not as a concept, but as a practice. Because resilience is not about never feeling doubt. It's about continuing despite it. Now understand this clearly. Every path that leads to growth includes resistance, delays, setbacks, uncertainty, and if you expect it to be smooth, you will break. Because reality doesn't match expectation. Now pause for a moment. Think about the last time something didn't go as planned. What did you do? Did you adjust or did you stop? Because that response is your pattern, and patterns define outcomes. Now here's the deeper truth. Resilience is not built in easy moments. It's built in difficult ones. When things don't go your way, when results don't show up, when effort feels unrewarded, that's where resilience forms. Now let's go deeper. Why do people struggle with resilience? Because they attach their identity to immediate results. If things go well, they feel strong. If things go wrong, they feel weak. But that's unstable because results fluctuate. Progress is not linear. There will be ups and there will be downs. And if your confidence depends on constant progress, you will lose it the moment things slow down. Now here's the shift. Detach your identity from short-term outcomes. Instead of saying, I'm successful because this worked, say, I'm consistent regardless of the outcome. That shift changes everything because now your confidence is internal, not external. Now imagine this. You face a setback. Instead of reacting emotionally, you respond strategically, you analyze, you adjust, you continue. That's resilience. And over time, that mindset builds strength because every challenge becomes feedback, not failure. Now here's something important. Resilience is not about pushing endlessly. It's about adapting intelligently, knowing when to rest, when to adjust, when to continue. Because burnout is not resilience. It's imbalance. Now take a moment again. Where have you stopped in the past? Not because you couldn't continue, but because it felt difficult, because that's where resilience was needed, and that's where it can be rebuilt. Now here's the powerful realization. Every time you continue, when it's hard, you strengthen something inside you, something that cannot be taken away. Confidence, not based on outcomes, but based on proof. Proof that you don't stop. Proof that you adapt. Proof that you continue. And that kind of confidence is powerful because it changes how you approach everything. You stop fearing setbacks. You stop avoiding challenges. You start moving forward with stability. Now here's the deeper layer. Resilience compounds, just like effort, just like time. The more you practice it, the stronger it becomes. And eventually, it becomes part of your identity. You don't think about quitting. You think about adjusting. That's the shift. Now understand this clearly. The wealth game is not won by those who never face difficulty. It's won by those who continue when difficulty appears. Because over time, most people drop out. They stop. They drift. They return to comfort. But those who stay, those who adapt, those who continue, they reach a point where everything starts to align, and that alignment feels like success, but it was built through resilience. Now take a breath here. Let that settle. Because this is not about being perfect, it's about being persistent. Now in the next chapter, we're going to explore something that determines how far your resilience can take you. Vision. Because resilience without direction leads to endurance without purpose. But resilience with vision creates unstoppable momentum. This is where everything begins to connect. Chapter 19. Vision, the anchor that keeps you moving. You can be disciplined. You can be consistent. You can even be resilient. But without vision, you will eventually lose direction. Because resilience without direction becomes endurance without purpose. You keep going, but you don't know where you're going. And over time, that creates exhaustion. This is why vision matters. Not as a dream, not as a vague idea, but as a clear understanding of what you are building and why. Now pause for a moment. If everything you're doing right now continues, where is it leading? Not what you hope, not what you imagine, but what your current path is actually building, because that answer is your real direction. And if that direction is unclear, your effort becomes scattered, your focus weakens, your motivation fades, your decisions lose alignment. Now here's the deeper truth. Vision is not about predicting the future. It's about creating a direction that guides your actions in the present. It gives meaning to your effort. It gives purpose to your discipline. It gives clarity to your decisions. And without it, everything feels temporary. Now let's go deeper. Why do most people struggle with vision? Because it requires thinking beyond the immediate, beyond the next paycheck, beyond the next result, beyond the next moment. And that kind of thinking is uncomfortable because it forces you to confront something real. What do you actually want? Not what others expect, not what looks good, not what feels safe, but what truly matters to you. And that question is not easy because it requires honesty. Now here's the shift. Instead of asking, what should I do next? Start asking, what kind of life am I building? That question changes everything. Because now, your actions are not random. They are aligned. You begin making decisions based on direction, not impulse. Now imagine this. You wake up and you know where you're going, not every detail, but the direction. You know what matters. You know what doesn't. You know what you're building. And that clarity simplifies everything. You stop chasing distractions. You stop reacting to noise. You stop comparing yourself constantly because you're focused on your path. Now here's something important. Vision is not fixed. It evolves as you grow, as you learn, as you experience more. Your vision becomes clearer, more refined, more aligned, and that's okay. Because vision is not about perfection, it's about direction. Now take a moment again. What are you building? Not in general, specifically. What does your future look like? What does your life feel like? What kind of control do you have? What kind of freedom do you experience? No, because those answers shape your decisions today. Now, here's the deeper layer. Vision protects you. It protects your focus. It protects your energy. It protects your time. Because when you're clear on where you're going, you naturally filter everything else. Opportunities, distractions, decisions, everything gets evaluated based on alignment. And that alignment creates consistency. Now understand this clearly. Without vision, you drift. With vision, you direct. And direction is what builds momentum. Now here's the truth. Most people don't lack ability. They lack direction. And without direction, even the strongest effort becomes wasted. Now imagine combining everything you've built so far. Clarity, execution, resilience, focus, energy, all aligned. With a clear vision, that's power. Because now, you're not just moving, you're moving with purpose. Now take a breath here, because this is where everything begins to connect. And in the next chapter, we're going to explore something that determines whether your vision turns into reality. Commitment. Because vision without commitment remains potential, but commitment turns potential into results. This is where the wealth game becomes personal. Chapter 20, Commitment, the line you draw with yourself. There comes a moment, after clarity, after vision, after understanding the game, where everything comes down to one thing. Not talent, not opportunity, not timing, commitment. Because without commitment, everything you've learned remains potential. Ideas stay ideas. Plans stay plans. Vision stays imagination. And nothing changes. Now here's the truth most people don't say out loud. Commitment is rare. Not because people don't want success, but because commitment requires something uncomfortable. Finality. It requires deciding, not just thinking. It requires choosing a direction and staying with it, even when it's hard, even when it's unclear, even when it tests you. Now pause for a moment. How many times have you started something with intention, but without real commitment? You tried, you explored, you gave effort, but when things got difficult, you stepped back, you adjusted, you delayed, you stopped. Not because you couldn't continue, but because you weren't fully committed. That's the difference. Now understand this clearly. Commitment is not a feeling, it's a decision. A line you draw with yourself. A point where you say, no matter what happens, I continue. Not blindly, but intentionally, because you understand the direction. Now let's go deeper. Why do most people avoid commitment? Because commitment removes options. It closes the door on constant switching. It forces you to stay. And staying feels risky, because what if it doesn't work? What if you chose wrong? What if there's something better? That thinking keeps people in motion, but never in progress, because they're always exploring, never building. Now, here's the shift. Instead of asking, what if this isn't the perfect path? Ask, what happens if I never fully commit to any path? That question changes perspective, because without commitment, nothing compounds, nothing matures, nothing becomes real. Now imagine this. You choose a direction, you commit, not for a day, not for a week, but long enough to see it through. You stay when it's difficult, you adjust when needed, you continue when it's unclear. What happens? Depth builds, understanding grows, skill develops, momentum strengthens, and over time, results appear, not instantly, but inevitably. Because commitment creates continuity, and continuity creates progress. Now here's something important. Commitment does not mean rigidity. It doesn't mean ignoring feedback. It means staying aligned while adapting intelligently, because growth requires adjustment, but adjustment is different from quitting. One refines the path, the other abandons it. Now take a moment again. Where in your life are you half committed? Where are you trying but not fully deciding? Because that's where your energy is leaking. That's where progress is slowing. And that's where change begins. Now here's the powerful realization. When you fully commit, now pause for a moment. Look at everything you've heard, not as information, but as reflection. Where have you been operating unconsciously? Where have you been reacting instead of deciding? Where have you been building without structure? Because that awareness is where everything begins to change. Now here's the shift. The wealth game is not about becoming someone else. It's not about copying strategies or chasing trends. It's about understanding yourself and how you operate within the system. Because once you understand that, you stop playing blindly. You start playing intentionally. Now imagine this. You move with clarity. You act with consistency. You protect your focus. You manage your energy. You build with structure. You adapt when needed. You protect what you create. What happens? Everything stabilizes. Progress becomes sustainable. Growth becomes controlled. And over time, wealth becomes something different. Not just money, but control. Control over your time. Control over your direction. Control over your life. Now here's the most important realization. Wealth is not what you have. It is what you can keep and what continues. And most people never reach that point. Not because they can't, but because they never learned the game. Now you have. And that doesn't mean everything changes overnight. It means something shifts inside you. You see differently. You think differently. You decide differently. And those differences compound. Now take a breath here, because this is where your journey becomes real, not in listening, but in action. Now here's your moment. If something in this audiobook resonated with you, if something made you pause, reflect, see things differently, then don't let it stay as a thought. Turn it into a decision, a small one, but a real one. And if you're ready, make it visible. Hit like, not for validation, but as a commitment, a signal to yourself that you're not just consuming, you're changing. And in the comments, write one thing, just one, the one insight that hit you the hardest, the one shift you know you need to make, because writing it makes it real. And if you know someone who is working hard but still feels stuck, share this with them, because sometimes the difference between staying in the cycle and breaking it is simply seeing the game clearly. Now here's the final truth. The game has always been there. The rules have always been there. Most people just never learn them. Now you have. So the question is not, can you build wealth? The question is, will you play the game differently, starting now? Because everything you've heard, everything you've understood, leads to this moment. Not tomorrow, not someday, now. And the way you move from here will define everything that follows.